Welcome my fishing friends. Today I want to talk to you about maintenance on fishing reels. You know, I have a lot of bait casters because that's probably my favorite kind of reel. I love the way the mechanics are on it. I love the way it rings in line. I love the variety of line I can put on it and the variety of rods I can put on it. I still have my spinning cast rods and for sure rods and reels that I like to use under certain applications, particularly walleye, light line, that kind of thing. But today I want to talk to you about maintenance of these reels that you have. One of the big things for longevity, of course, on anything from your car to anything that's mechanical, you definitely want to be able to have a good maintenance team on it. And what I want to show you today is that anybody can take it apart and maintain the parts that I want to talk about today. We're not talking about digging into something that's broken, going deep. In most cases, if you're not totally knowledgeable and have your reel apart many times, you're best to take it to somebody to get it done. So really do any of this at your own risk. But pretty much what I'm going to show you today, I feel confident that anybody could take care of it. It's not hard, not difficult. So one of the things you do need, one of the things that I do, every time I get a new reel, I put them in my book. Reels mostly come with a blow-up of all the parts. So that way if something breaks, that you can order the part. And also, more importantly, when we're working on something that we're taking it apart and we do get into that delicate part, you know, where the drag is and so forth, you want to have a total understanding of the concept of where those washers may go, which one goes on top of the other, and that's why this diagram will work real well for you, as well as ordering the part that wore out if they're available. And in this book, I have every one of the reels that I have that I use the most, and so forth. Now, it works out best when you buy a name brand, like Daiwa or Arbu Garcia, which is one of my favorite lines, because you can get parts from them. They're pretty good. If you get some off-brand things, like for example, Gander Mountain had a really nice reel that I bought from, and it was an open face, and I liked it. It worked really well. It was nice and smooth, and one of the gears in it got screwed up and stopped working. I needed to replace the gear. I could not get the gear. Gander Mountain didn't have it. They didn't even really have a manufacturer line to go through to try to get the part. If it was made by somebody else, it wasn't one of the major companies that was making it. So I was out of luck. Now, it wasn't even the money that bothered me. It was the idea that I didn't have that reel anymore, and I really liked it. So that's something to consider when you're purchasing. Not that there's anything wrong with buying an off-brand, but be ready. You may never be able to get the parts for it if something breaks on it. I have a lot of reels, so I don't have a big problem going from one to the other, but I still want all my reels, when I pull them out, ready to go fishing, that they're ready to go and they don't jam up on me on something I could have prevented. The other thing I have, if I'm doing a lot of more serious repair and I'm going in with a lot of little parts, I would use a cloth like this to hold a little part that might pop out and don't go ripping down on the floor and I can never find it. But what we're doing today is not anything like that that's serious. I have this blow up here. I'll set this to the side like I would under normal circumstances. The other thing you have is maybe some silicone lube. May use some of that. Also, line reel. I like this stuff really well. It works well. WD-40. A lot of people grab that and use it. Really, don't use it on any. Don't use it on any of your bearings or anything on the internals of the reel. It doesn't last. I like it on the outside. You can do it, but I usually use this reel and line now to replace it. But for years I did the WD-40. Yeah, and this reel and line, not to be a sales pitch here, but I like this a lot because when I'm when I'm fishing, I can go spray my line, and it does help it to limp out a little bit, especially if you're pulling out a reel that you haven't used in a while and the line's kind of wound up on it pretty good. This will lighten it up, make it even cast a little better. And I'll spray my whole line, my whole rod with it. And the reason I spray the whole rod with it is because that keeps the friction rate. Your line will hit the eyelets and so forth. This kind of lubricates all that. Works real well. That's why this reel and line, it's a good product. The other thing I use is I do have this little kit that I got. And in this kit has, which is one of the important things, it has the right oil for the bearings and so forth in your reel. It also has a little grease spot, which we'll put a little grease on certain things in the reel, and I keep a little tools, a screwdriver and whatever. But obviously everybody's got a little, what I'm talking about again today is getting in there without worry and without difficulty. So I'll set this aside. Okay, let's first take a look at the book. And now I got the die out. I'm going to take a look at that first. And you can see the whole diagram that I was mentioning earlier. Every part is listed in there. But like I say, more importantly, as we take it apart, we see where these parts go if we were so inclined to be able to take it apart that much. But again, today we're not. My goal again is to be able to have you take it apart and clean it up. The first thing we got to do is take off the side plate. And that's really relatively easy. What I normally do though, prior to, is this is some black tape. All I did was tape the spool so I don't lose the line and the line doesn't get all over everything, because you got to kind of slide it back and forth in there, and you want to keep it so it doesn't come loose. Now this one works really well because it's a little more modern. It has one screw that you undo right there and nothing to it. It works really quite easily, and then once that's undone, and make sure it is, wiggle it back and forth, and then you twist this, the side plate down, and pull it straight off. There it is. Now we're going to set that aside for a second, and then we're going to grab this spool and we're going to pull it out. Again, we're going to set that down too. Now we're going to take a look at a couple of things in here. Okay, now that the spool is off, you can see right in there, right where the mechanism is there that actually locks on to your spool. Now your spool will have the male part that will fit into that female part, so it will lock onto the spool, so when you crank the wheel, it turns the spool so you're cranking in the line. Now once that gets in there, it locks tight. There really should be no movement. There should be no slop in that at all. But what you want to do is you want to get like your Q-tip here, but I'm not talking about your regular homemade Q-tips that you have around the house. This is a padded Q-tip that's like a sponge, so it absorbs, but it doesn't leave any debris. So you want to clean that all up and clean all the way around inside there too. Really basically simple. Just take a look and see what you see, and then clean that up the best you possibly can. Now on here, on the spool itself, you can do the same thing. You're going to make sure there isn't anything. You see that bearing there? There's a bearing right there, and if I go like this, I can move that bearing around, and I see it move, and that's what you want to do. You want to clean that up. Now on the other side here, there's a bearing inside there. There's mechanism. I mean, you can see there's a spring-like loaded in there. Anyway, you want to look for all the debris. That's the main thing. You want to look for all the debris. A little dab of grease, and I'll put it on my little sponge here. Actually, I'll put it on the back side of this little sponge. Put it right there, and then I'll take that and I'll go down inside there again, and I'll drop it in there and move that around so I get just a dab of grease in there, and I'll put a dab of grease on this. But underneath that is where the bearing is. Now the bearing, I want to put the bearing, a little oil right on that bearing, and this is a perfect applicator to do that, because it's got like a needle on there that allows me to do it just a little dab. Not too much. You don't need too much. It will spool around really well. And there's one on this side too, right there where the shaft is. I kind of like to get a little dab on there, and you can see it don't take much. Now we're going to put this all back together, and when you do, you have to make sure that these line up, otherwise it won't seat in there correctly. You find that it won't. It will lock out, and your board here on the side won't fit. Now on this side, on our cover here, we also have a bearing right there. We have the gears. I see absolutely no dirt or anything in there. There's one little speck there. I don't see anything in there that would make it become a problem. That little gearing looks like it's not really a gear. That's the mechanical adjustment for the magnets that's in there to be able to slow it down. So, but we do have a little bearing in there. We just want to hit. Now sometimes there's controversial to sometimes whether you don't need to oil a bearing, and some that you do. You don't need to over oil it, that's for sure, but a little dab right there and a little dab on the end here. I do like to put a little dab right there, and then I'll put this all back together. Oh, one other place, I like to put a little dab on the spool up here on the worm gear right there, just to make sure that works. Now when I put it back, you'll find that you can seal it. If there's a seal in there, it's nice and snug. Now I can put it back. Now it's on there. Don't forget though, to screw it back together here. Okay. Now at this point, when you had it apart and want that, now it's just snug it up. It doesn't have to be super tight. Now I'll put the brake back on and make sure that that's smooth. Oh wow. It actually is a little smoother, and I thought it was really smooth before we started this, but it does make a difference. Now the other thing we want to take a look at is this gearing. We had the worm gear there. That one takes a little more effort to get it all cleaned out, but it's worthwhile to do so. And moving that same little sponge back and forth over that to get the gear, again, got to move that back and forth. You have to move the wheel, turn the wheel over so it will go back and forth and give you a chance to clean. Now, unique thing about this has a pretty nice cover there. It slides, and you want to make sure that where the line goes through, usually that's Teflon or some other hard material, so your line doesn't dig into it. But that right there, this is where your line goes through, and that's logical to get dirt and so forth. It's kind of good to clean that out after every fishing trip if you would, but it's pretty hard. I'm not taking this off now, but you can take this off, this little piece off right there. And what that does is in there's a little spool that goes down, and it's a fork, and that fork will fit into that worm gear, and that's what makes it go back and forth. But I think we're pretty safe on that. So I am going to put a little drop of oil. Some people grease it. I'm going to put a little dab of oil. I don't really want to put grease in there so much. But the bad thing about grease, and this is just personal opinion, I mean, there's probably other guys that knows a lot more about it than me, and it will counter what I'm saying here, but I like putting oil there versus grease. Grease has a tendency to collect more than what oil does. It collects more grime, more dirt, it just sticks to it, and a little harder to actually wear through. And I kind of like it, to eventually get into the gears, move back and forth, and I think that oil does that at a quicker pace. Okay, now at this point, that's the basic cleanup. That's all I'm going to do at this point, and that's all I'm suggesting. You can do that and have good security that you ain't going to hurt anything, and your reel's going to last better. Another time I'll show you this other side, but I know there's a lot of videos on going deeper into the reel. Well, that's all there is to it. Just a little maintenance on your reels can go a long ways. You certainly don't want to get out on the water, set that hook, start reeling, and it starts jamming up and you can't get it in. Has it ever happened to me? Well, sure it has. I haven't fished this many years without it being a problem with the reel. But this would prevent an awful lot of problems that you could have on the water. So, until next time, this is Mike from The Fishing Show.